Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's the penultimate, actually, of this run of the AACRAO's Credentials Chats. I'm Noah Geiser, your host, and I'm really excited this week to be joined by Quintina Barnett Gallion of AACRAO. She is the Associate Executive Director of Strategy and Planning at AACRAO. Quintina, thank you so much for joining us.
Noah, thank you for having me. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, I'm really excited, especially because we might twist your arm a little bit. So really appreciate you joining. And you were, if for the people who were in Columbus at the annual meeting, you were everywhere. People definitely saw you. But for anybody who doesn't already know you from your current or your previous stint with AACRAO, could you, before we jump into all things credentials, just share a little bit about who you are and your relationship to AACRAO?
Yeah, sure. I always tend to think that people don't know who I am, which is always shocking and probably surprising when people are like, "You're 6 feet tall." People see you, and I'm like, "No, they don't." I have been at AACRAO. I first came to AACRAO in 2005. It's my first job out of undergrad, in an administrative role with our International Education Services Department. Um, Yeah, well, we used to do foreign credential evaluations, and so I supported that work, and left for grad school, did a few things in the world, moved to Seattle and Texas, and came back in 2010 to the same department in a marketing role. I moved from there to our Legislative Affairs Department in GR and communications. Helped start our communications department that didn't exist before, bringing all the technology that we now leverage and how we leverage it. And most recently, moved from the director of marketing communications to this whole new department, a whole new division under the restructure of AACRAO with our departments of marketing communication as well as impact and engagement and oversee those groups. It was a quick hit history.
I appreciate it, and good to know that you started on international credentialing because before we went live, everybody, we were talking about early Panamanian reggaeton. So uh bodied over some of that. I think that is also really helpful to hear about just the communications background and your current role as the Associate Executive Director of Strategy and Planning, because the reason we wanted to have you on today was really just about communications and about just all the confusion on what we're calling these things. And
Mhm.
as of yesterday, for anybody who noticed on the AACRAO webpage or in our community of practice on AACRAO Exchange, we have renamed things from the digital credentials community of practice to innovative credentials. And so, share with us just, what happened there? Why the change?
Well, first, I'd like to cross my fingers and hope for you guys who are listening now or maybe later that this is the last change. I think folks who've been following this work since we first started in 2015 saw it start as, the comprehensive learner record. Then we moved to the LER. Then it was the CLR and the LER. Then we have micro-credentials and alternative credentials. And I think the insight from our June 2023 report on credential confusion is really what prompted this switch. There's so much going on. And one of the biggest insights is that names matter, right? People are talking about this work in various ways, doing very different things that are kind of related and don't know where to connect with each other because everyone's using a different name. And so, um, in order to keep the conversation going, but make sure it is consistent and that people aren't lost. Well, I thought we were talking about this, and how does it fit with that? We're using an umbrella term, innovative credentials. And that way we can have very specific conversations about the different components of those pieces, but keep it all in one place and make sure that when you say this, another group also is also hearing and using the same language. So data governance in a sense.
I love that. And for anybody who's thinking, wait, she didn't mention extended transcripts. We see you, extended transcript memory people. Uh, and I think as you were walking through it, I love how you came back to data governance, that you're, as a comms person, you bring this, very acro registrar enrollment management professional lens to keeping track of things.
Oh, absolutely. This is who our people are. They can be, in a good way, um, sticklers about what you call something, and it's important. It speaks to the reputation that they've developed as being trusted sources of credentials and data records. And so we don't want to devalue the reputation they've built and the work that they do, and want to make sure that they feel comfortable getting involved in these conversations because it does seem kind of it keeps changing. So how do I take account of this and how do I get involved if it's something different every week, every month, every year? We need to make it approachable. We need to make it digestible for our members in the enrollment management side, specifically, I think, who have to have these conversations in a very different way than our records and registration people.
And I'm almost picturing, when we're doing website updates, how we'll sometimes do change logs and we have version history. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering also, Quintina, if you could talk to us about, as in your role, looking at communications, looking at strategy, when you saw that credential confusions report, and you thought, okay, we need to change this up. We cannot just say digital credentials and have that mean everything from PDFs to, these more innovative things. What were the discussions like internally, and maybe even who's involved? What was it exclusive to AACRAO or were there other partners involved? And, how did we get to this place of innovative credentials?
Oh gosh, no, these conversations definitely don't happen in a vacuum. Internally at AACRAO, of course, you have our research team, Wendy Kilgore in particular. You have the folks who are leading this work on staff, Mark McConaughey and Mike Simmons. But we have our partners at AACRAO, right? Like those folks are part of our work. They are leading the conversation and on one end. It's why we have our convergence conference with them. We're having these conversations with One Ec Tech. You're having these conversations with Starbucks. I mean, Amazon, Costco, like Walmart. Everyone is in these different areas of what is a credential, from workforce to K-12, to the Chamber of Commerce, right? Like there is a bit to be said and shared from varying perspectives. And so we want to make sure, AACRAO specifically, that we are digesting all of this in a way that works for those various conversations. Did I answer your question? I feel like I started to kind of
Yeah, I
name
might,
drop there.
I might have to do a little bit more there, but yeah, just to give it, you did mention UPSIA, and for anybody who doesn't know UPSIA, that's our sister organization for our colleagues working in professional and continuing in online education, and they are our co-conspirators with AACRAO for this convergence conference that Quintina mentioned. This is happening September 30th to October 2nd. Did I get that right?
I heard
To 2024 in New Orleans. And registration is live. I believe early registration goes through July. Maybe I'll look it up. I apologize. I don't have that all memorized, but you do have time to get in on that early registration. Last year they did. I think they actually sold out
sold out
registration
last year.
during early registration. So definitely put in your funding request and get there. Last year they capped it at 600 people. I'm not sure what exactly will be this year, but definitely really great conference for this stuff. But you also mentioned, I kind of want to go back to just how we ended up on the name. But before we do, when you were talking just the alphabet soup of all these different organizations,
Mhm.
you didn't exclusively mention higher ed organizations.
No, no, not at all. No. No,
And why is that? Like, is that thinking around the consumption of credentials and there's this broader ecosystem for these things to actually manifest and be operationalized? Would you mind sharing just a little bit about that?
no, of course. And thank you for pointing that out. I think what I hope people haven't forgotten that we tend to talk about our members as a to and through folks. And so we touch the K-12, we touch the workforce, we deal with the in-between of those of what's happening in post-secondary education. We know that the average learner today is moving, is more mobile, is more likely to transfer, is more likely to be an adult. Like your credentials need to be able to move. They need to be understood in various systems. And we want our learners to be able to have access and ownership of them as they progress in their career and then their post-secondary education, which we know is not going to just end with one degree. And so when I name all those different people and those different organizations, it's because AACRAO is thinking about how folks are going to use these credentials and their records moving forward. And we need to be having conversations with those partners. And again, speaking in a language in which we can all be talking about the same things.
And we get so much in the weeds technologically on micro credentials, digital badges,
Mhm.
LER, CLR, and you hear we'll hear our colleague Mark McConaughey talk about interoperability. And it's this very technical term, but I hear you thinking of word language
Oh,
and words mattering as an interoperable function.
I am not a tech person. So this for me has to function in a way that I can speak about it, that our members can speak about it. At the end of the day, this is for our learners, right? And so they are not going to be speaking this heavy tech language of what this record is and how it got to where it needs to be. They just need to know that it works, and how to speak about it. I don't want to say generically, but use in a way that's usable. And so that's what I want to make sure is more approachable, in how we refer to the work that we're doing. Because um, without the buy-in of the end user at the end of the day, we're just talking to ourselves.
Mm. And you really touch on something that I think has been a real thread in, this term's credential chat series that we've been doing is you talk about that mobility issue. As we think about our learners, having economic mobility, career mobility, geographic mobility, that they're going to require learning records that are just as mobile as they are as they are aspiring to be. And what part of that is we've been talking about consumers of audiences for these credentials. And that, I think one of the things that you're hitting on when you talk about these different organizations is that, in the past, that audience has been really limited as far as who needs to be actually seeing, receiving, and using, operationalizing learning records, that you're preparing us for a near future where there's a whole lot more stakeholders who are actually giving a darn about
Oh, yeah.
learning records.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We see people talking about just basic upskilling, right? I think we had someone speak most recently about what this is, the person that's going to live to be 110 or 50 has already been born. And what the education pathway for that person looks like is beyond the 4 years. And so um, we just have to be thinking about what tomorrow, which is now, looks like, and how we prepare to have those conversations down the line.
And I think I probably have time for one more question with you. And so I want to take advantage of your expertise as this communications person that we're landing on innovative credentials, which by the way, everybody, if you're not already a member of the community of practice, it has been rebranded now. You can click and go see, but also if you go to aacrao.org, you'll be able to scroll down to the bottom of the page and see it on the bottom of the AACRAO website, the one-click link to access that community practice. It is free to join, even if you are not a member, though we hope you are. As we talk about this communications piece, what would you love AACRAO members to be hearing and thinking about, not only for, making sense, just making their own medium, making sense of these things, of the broader landscape, but internally, how can they be bringing this communications mindset to their work on campus to be leaders in credential innovation and help lead change and make meaning together through, a real communications mindset?
So this is going to sound counterintuitive, but I would say that for them not to be sticklers about the language that other people are using. Um, I think that sometimes people get so bogged down in, well, we're doing badging or we're doing micro-credentials or we're just, it's not this. And so they don't engage, or they let it sit to the side, or it's like, we don't have to worry about that. Or I don't know how to engage. Um, the beauty of the language innovative credentials allows you to say, like, we're all talking about the same thing.
Mm.
Let me find the path for the connection of what they're actually doing, and how I can facilitate that process.
I love that. So be sympathetic listeners, is what I'm hearing. That maybe what they say is not what they actually mean, and to, to not be sticklers on the exact language just yet while they're still figuring it all out. Well, I am just so grateful that you said yes. If not the first time, then the second time that we tried to twist you out to get you to do this with us, because I really do think that in all seriousness, this is really important stuff for this community. And we are really grateful for your guidance and leadership in strategy and helping us navigate change with this new shift to innovative credentials. Quintina, Barnett, Gallion, thank you so much for joining us this week on Credential Chats.
No, Noah, thank you for having me. And again, we look forward to seeing you guys in the community of practice.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks so much and have a badge-worthy week, everyone.